Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Susan Kaufman. I'm here for Attitude Magazine's weekly ADHD Experts broadcast. Today's webinar is interestingly midway through the school year this week, I think, for many families. And it's probably a good time to tune up your strategies for coping with things like disorganization, impulsivity, and any other symptoms of ADD or ADHD that might be causing difficulties at school or at home. I know from our readers that kids struggle with sensory issues, with staying on task, and with motor coordination, and all those things, interestingly, can fall under the rubric of occupational therapy, which you may not know much about. But we have a great speaker today, Cara Koscinski, who is a veteran pediatric occupational therapist, as well as the mother of 2 children with ADHD and sensory processing disorder, or ADD, I guess. So Cara today is going to address what occupational therapy is. It's a mystery to many people, and why you might want to consider adding it to your toolkit, in addition to all the other strategies that our families use, such as counseling and tutors, nutrition, exercise, medication, to address their child's symptoms. Occupational therapy can improve the skills children use just for daily living and provide tons of confidence to succeed in life. So some of the topics that Cara will address today include how to break down tasks into manageable steps, organization strategies that you can teach at home, some sensory integrations to help focus, tips for motor coordination difficulties, and lots more. Just ending with something I think really important: how to use a positive mindset and words to help your child take ownership of his or her ADD or ADHD. So let me introduce Cara to you a bit more. She is an MOT and OTR, a veteran pediatric occupational therapist. She specializes in sensory processing disorder, in ADHD and ADD, in learning disorders, behavior, and autism. She's published 6 books about special needs topics and occupational therapy, including The Pocket Occupational Therapist for families of children with special needs. And in addition, she regularly blogs and speaks throughout the U.S. You can find her website, The Pocket Occupational Therapist, and you can reach her via that website or via her email address, which is thepocket@gmail.com. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So with that introduction, let me turn it over to Cara with our thanks again for being here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. And I am excited to tell you about occupational therapy, which is my profession and passion in life. So let's go ahead and talk about what is occupational therapy, because I love the fact that Susan said a lot of people don't know what it even is. So we want you to know what we do and how we can help you and your family to basically improve function and quality of life for you and your child. So we basically there are assistants, which have associate's degrees. There are bachelor's degrees, master's, and now the push is moving toward doctoral level clinicians. And I'm actually getting my doctorate. I'll have it hopefully within the next year or so. But it is important that we look at individual children. And the whole point of occupational therapy and our main focus is to look at how any disability affects each child and make a plan accordingly. So you might be wondering why this little boy is hanging out in OT on the right. And you probably could think, well, he's not working or that's not his job. So let's talk about what we do. We really are trained in a lot of areas. And if you think about it, there's cognition, which is how we think, and the parts of our brain, which is the anatomy and neurology part. We look at the physiology, which is how our body functions. And we look at sociology and human studies. So how do societal rules affect our behavior and our person as a whole? One of the big things that we can do is sensory processing. And I know many, many people have questions about children that feel itchy and pinchy and have a difficult focus, because of sensory processing issues. So we can address this in the whole body. But one of the biggest things that we don't do is find children an occupation. So it's an interestingly named profession. But here's what we do. Beautiful learning happens through play. So play then is the job of a child. So how are our children learning? Well, they're learning through play. So when you think about the occupation, if you're in a doctor's office and you fill out, the questionnaire, it says, what is your occupation? And there is a student section, but there for little kids is play. So full-time play means learning skills. And you might look at this picture that I have here and think, well, that little girl is definitely reading a book. Well, I look at it thinking, look at her. She's got nice shift of weight in her body. She's using both hands together. Look at her eyes working together with her hands to focus on the book. So just the way we look at things is different. One of the biggest questions that I get as an occupational therapist is, why are you playing with my child and not doing therapy? Well, that is the point, is that we have this thing called activity analysis, where we look at a play skill and we can break it down into little parts to see at what part the child is not succeeding, and then further adapting that activity for a successful experience. Because don't we all build confidence when we're successful? So that's what we do. We look at a play activity. And it is true, there are occupational therapists that work in adult rehabilitation, and they do the same thing. So what can we do for you and your family in the pediatric and adult setting? We can look at the way we organize, plan, and basically be independent in life. Now, I know so many of us, and my personal children struggle with this, as well as my husband, who also has ADHD. It's interesting because planning and organizing are not just skills we need for work, they're skills we need in our daily lives, right? So when we're doing something as simple as meal preparation, we need to have the supplies necessary for the meal and all of the appropriate recipe and the pans and so forth. We also have to consider sensory integration. So a lot of fidgeting, right? A lot of our kids are fidgeting in this state of constant motion. So as we go through this webinar today, I'm going to tell you some helpful strategies that you can use immediately, because I want you to leave here today knowing that there are things that you can do for your children, and OT can help you. So another big one for us with ADHD and ADD is this impulsivity, right? It's this, I see something and I want to do it now, right? So how do we shift between tasks? So motor skills, meaning fine and gross motor, and we could do this across settings. So let's go ahead and talk about topic number 1, which is breaking the task down. So let's think about this. One time I had my son, and both of my sons actually were in the room. It's our playroom, and there are 3 pieces of furniture there. There's a TV stand, a sofa, and 1 bookshelf. So I, as just the mom in the room, said, please, let's just rearrange this room and shift everything 1 wall over to the right. Okay. So most of us then think about that, think, okay, this is exactly, we form this plan in our head. So we have a plan in our head. That's the ability to form the plan, right? And then we have to think about, how do we execute the plan? Well, neither of my sons could figure out exactly how to do that. What do you mean first? And it actually caused this meltdown, right? And I think so many of us as family members and as people with ADHD, we struggle with that. It's so easy to think, how do I do this major task and break it down? So I think what helps a lot of our families is giving these small little rewards. So I had the boys do a map. So let's draw a map of what we have and then how it might look to move it. So I think graphics are very important for our kids and visual representations of things, because it does give them this visual, oh, that's what it looks like. And also, let's talk about baby steps. How important is it for us to do baby steps, right? For all of us. So if you've got, let's just say, a long passage to read for, you're studying something for your work or so forth, every time you do maybe a little section or a chapter, put a little M&M there, right, for yourself, a little brain candy, so to speak. It doesn't have to be candy, but it can be any little reward for baby steps. So that really does help our children, because remember that confidence builds this success. And you're thinking, or success builds confidence. So when you're successful at something, you're going to feel better about yourself, right? So how about this? Look at the sticky notes on the right. The world is ever changing, right? We don't live in a static world. So I don't like the use of writing in pen in the calendar, because what changes? Everything, every day, we change, the world changes. So I like using Post-it notes, because when you're using those either on a board by the student's desk or anywhere, you can move those, reposition them. And graphic organizers, again, another visual cue for our children and adults. So what do I mean by this breaking tasks down? So I think one of the biggest accommodations that we can do in school is to color code all of our materials. And as you can see, we've got this on the right here. We've got the reading books. Everything, the folder, the books, the workbook is all color coded. That way we know what we must grab in a hurry, okay? And I think it's really important to then add maybe a pencil case. So let's say it's math work, and we're going to have a compass, a ruler, a highlighter, the graph paper, etc. You want to then color code all of that and package it together. So think about that on your student's desk. That would look a lot more neat and organized to have it color coded. How about this? Now, this is a nice little graphic to the right here on the bottom of a student's evening. So we have exactly specific times. We have specific little breakdown of chunks. So it's very helpful for our students. Also, we want to think specifics, right? It's hard when we say, go and do there and do your homework, right? That's difficult for our kids. But if we break it down, it really is helpful. And this is one of my favorite graphics here. This do homework is like, okay, I got to do homework, but what does it really mean, right? So instead, we want to go with something very specific. And I've chosen a toileting routine here because, again, you can adapt this not just for homework, but for anything. This is a very specific schedule on the right of what to do. There is a wonderful free website. You can join it or you can go on it for free called do2learn.com. And that's where I pulled some of the visuals from today. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about organization strategies. Okay, so what do we do here? This is a biggie for us, right? We have to take pictures. Now, I'm going to say take pictures of the steps versus clip art here. Now, what is your expectation of if you think, oh, okay, a clean room? Think about your expectation. That might mean something vastly different to you versus your child, right? So if you're going into an organization strategy, what does a notebook mean? What does a organized backpack mean? So I love the fact that we can take a picture of exactly what we expect our children to do and to focus on, and then post that for them. This is what it looks like. So you can do that again in homework areas, in rooms and desks. Use this idea all over the place. Instead of having the cartoon text and pictures, have the actual picture. Now, I like not having flashy areas, right? So, we think of these wonderful teachers that come in and they have this bright, beautiful classroom. It's so wonderful. They've spent so much time downloading the glitter and the glitz, but sometimes for our students, it's way too much. So you want to make sure that things are not as flashy for your kids. The desk that you're doing homework at and the areas should be clean, tidy, and very not flashy because that's distracting visually. So we're going to talk about sensory processing and why it could be distracting. Another accommodation I love is having this extra set of books for home. I think anytime you can alleviate the student having to pack up everything at the end of the busy day and bringing it home. Have you ever forgotten, let's just say your math book and you've got to do math homework? That is so overwhelming, right? So if you've got an extra set of books for home use, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so now it's advancing too much, but that's okay. So let's talk about this premise of a rubric. All right. Rubrics can be used for anything. And I think occupational therapists are learning also to use rubrics. A rubric is basically what do I expect from you? right? So again, very ambiguous directions. I expect you to do neat homework. Well, what does neat mean? Well, here's exactly what neat means. This particular rubric is about a child checking his own work. Now, what do we do for kids when we show them how to be independent? We show them this independence. This is what you can do. So this is empowering your child, right? You're empowering your child to check his or her work before someone else looks at it. So this is a really cool thing because then you're getting the child thinking, well, what does it look like? So this is a 1-star work, and you can see where I'm going with this. To the left, the 1-star work is kind of sloppy, right? But look at the 4-star work. So after your child, well, actually, let's back that up. Before your child finishes this task, so as part of the job, give your child a rubric and review it. This is my expectation. This is what we're going to do, so that he or she can plan what they're going to do and then succeed and then self-grade. Have them actually fill out the rubric first to predict what is going to happen. I love that. There's, again, some other examples of rubrics. Some are complicated, some are not. You can make these guys as simple or as easy as you would like. So, for instance, on the left, we have one for a child that maybe gives a little less grading, right? Happy, middle of the road, and sad. How did I do? And then a writing rubric is on the right. So, search these online, create your own, have fun with the rubrics. All right, let's go to our next one, behavior. Oh my goodness, this is one of the topics that I speak a lot on. It's never too early to start working on behavior. And see, I've rolled in the make predictions here. Making predictions can help children to not, let's say, freak out when things don't go their way. They're kind of expecting it, right? This is called the incredible 5-point scale on the right. And it's basically using a visual of the color. Number 1 is green. I'm feeling revved up. I feel great. To number 5, I feel terrible. I'm angry, upset. So kind of before you start an activity with your student or child, check in. How do I feel right now? And then you can use this technique as this self-monitoring for behavior to think, you know what? I feel really great right now. How do I feel then whenever I am angry? I feel like number 5. So you can use this right now, or you can use it to predict future behaviors. So that's a really cool thing to do. All right, we're going to advance and posting rules. We need to let our children know the expectations. Do you want to know what's expected of you? Absolutely. That's why you're given a job description when you take the job. What am I expected to do? Same thing with our kids. Post the rules and expectations before and often. So not at the time when the child is in a tantrum. That is the worst time to do it. You want to teach your child the rules and expectations before the behavior. So you're being very proactive. So calm down areas are these new wonderful things that OTs have used forever, and they're little areas. So when your child's feeling like they're getting upset, you send them to an area, and there might be a weighted blanket in there. There could be something fidgety, right? A fidget toy for them to fidget with, some calming music. Our whole goal is to create an area where the child can calm down, take some nice deep breaths, and really feel those emotions before they start to boil. I know a lot of our kids are sitting at near boiling point all the time, right? They're sitting there at, oh my gosh, if you're looking at a Celsius scale, they're at 90 degrees all the time, near boiling. So get them into this calming area and talk about emotions. Okay, the big one here, I know we were talking before the course today, and sensory processing is one of the biggest things that occupational therapy works on, one of the biggest areas. So let's talk a little bit about why that might be. This is called the pyramid of learning, and all of my courses talk about this because it's so critical. If you look at the bottom, and I hope you can read it, you need to just look it up on Google and print it out for anyone that'll listen to you, because look at the bottom. We're talking about our nervous system here at the bottom of the pyramid. And then what is the very base of the pyramid that's next? The sensory systems, guys. It's our sight, smell, touch. It's our taste, but it's not just those. It is also the feeling of movement. It's the feeling of our body. Where is your body in space? So right now, put your arms up. How do you know they're up in the air? Because you have proprioception or feeling in them. Can you see the top? It says academic learning. Wow, that's way at the top. So we all know that we need a foundation of strong sensory processing to reach our academic learning. That's why our kids struggle. It's really a real thing. And I know families say the doctor didn't believe it, or, it's real if you've lived it, right? So we talk about what can we do for our children. Well, in general, we have kids that are seekers. So those kids could be kids that are crashing all over the place, right? Crashing and moving and seeking sensation. And then we have children who are more sedentary. They don't like to climb on the playground, right? They don't like to jump up in the air. They don't like to try new movement experiences. Well, what can we do for our kids? We can do what their body needs. And this is called a sensory diet. Now, a sensory diet is not a food diet per se. It is an activity diet. So what would we want to do? We would want to, this guy on the left here is pushing. He's doing what we call a wall push-up. So our children, we can build in through the day when we know they're kind of acting up or having a meltdown. We can build in these sensory interventions. So this is heavy work. If you think about it and you lean yourself into the wall, or like this guy's doing here, he's actually has his hands. If you put your palms on your chair and push up, it's called a chair push-up. So these are heavy work items, and they're generally calming to our kids. We want to build in these breaks all the time. This new push for alternative seating is really cool because a lot of our kids, I know my nephew is sitting on, or my niece, I'm sorry, she's in 3rd or 4th grade. She's sitting on a ball in class. The whole all the classroom sits on this exercise ball. Why? Because it helps their body to attend. They're working their core muscles strong because they want these students to attend to the task better. So that's why we do some of those things. And I know you know this feeling. It looks like a tag and it feels like a cactus, right? That is the thing. Our kids are focused on this pinch or the noise or some sort of something outside, and they cannot concentrate on what they're doing because all they feel is this pinch. All they hear is the vibration or buzz of the fluorescent lighting ahead. How are they going to focus on what they're supposed to do? So these are real anxieties. These are real things. So I like quiet work areas. I love noise canceling headphones for these kids. And a lot of times we recommend people shut off fluorescent lighting and just either seat the kids near the window. Of course, you don't want to have to deal with distractions outside. So you might want to just adjust the blinds or curtains. But natural lighting is better for our children, as are, just again, trying to know that when they are upset about a sensory stimulus, it is real. They are unable to adjust to that feeling. So, for example, one more thing I think it's interesting, that if a child has had, let's just say, a fire alarm go off in school, and the student fears that for the next time, they might only sit there and think, oh my gosh, the fire alarm is going to go off, the fire alarm. It may preoccupy them so much that they can't attend to what's going on. That is a real thing. It happens. So go to occupational therapy and we can help you. But I gave you some tips right then. Use noise canceling headphones, make a social story, create a visual that, hey, this is a fire alarm. It does make a noise, but if it does, we can put our noise canceling headphones on and I will be okay. All right, let's go to the next one, handwriting and motor concerns. We all know that fine motor is using our hands and our dexterity, right? Finger dexterity. Now, so many times I know we get handwriting referrals, which means that there's an inappropriate grasp on the pencil, or the child is not able to push hard enough, or maybe pushes too much. So we can help with that. But, grips on pencils. I am fine as a therapist with you adding a grip to a pencil, because anything that helps your child to become more functional is going to help the child, right? So look at this purse. I love this the. This is super easy. It's a pencil case with some sand and a Post-it note. So you're using an extra sensory. Anytime we add a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, anything like that to an activity, we are then giving more information, right? We're giving information to our bodies that says, this is not just a handwriting issue, but look, I can make it in the sand. I feel it with my fingers. So I love adding sensory to things. Use therapy putty to work on hand strengthening and put little tiny either coins or pegs in it. It's so fun. You can even cut therapy putty and pretend to do, eating things with it. Of course, you don't want to eat the putty. I must say that. But, you can practice making all these different forms of foams and clays that there are recipes all over Pinterest. Now, what's a big movement called? It's called gross motor. So this is called the body midline. So there is actually an imaginary line that cuts our body in half. Actually, our brains have different halves that control different areas, different emotions, and some of it concrete, some are emotional, and also our body has that. So I know a lot of our kids struggle to cross midline. Well, that means using both hands together for a task. How do we do that? How do we work on it? We want to add movement. So let's say we're working on our alphabet. We can draw the letters in sidewalk chalk and have our student draw big letters on the sidewalk with chalk, maybe walk on the letter, jump on the letter, jumping jacks, anything that makes the child to use their right, put your right arm out right now, move it all the way across to the left side of your body, and give yourself, do the same thing with your other arm and give yourself a big hug. So you're crossing your midline and giving yourself a hug. Think about maybe doing things diagonally, clapping and jumping when learning new skills. So add big body movements to new skills. So if I'm learning vocabulary words or spelling words, I really do want to add movement to it because that, again, involves gross motor learning and building more pathways. Okay, you guys, we're getting there. We're doing well. Enable focus and decrease distractions. Remember what I said before. We need to keep distractions to a minimum. So as an occupational therapist, I can make certain recommendations for accommodations in the school and at home. When we look at this one about worksheets at the bottom, colored worksheets are a very simple way to decrease distraction. And what do I mean by that? Most times we do black and white. Well, that can be super stimulating for some children's brains. So if you're looking at a black and white paper, you may see different distortions. If you have ADHD or sensory processing orders, you may see different distortions on the page, right? Now, colored worksheets, let's say you go and get a ream of pastel paper at the Staples or Office Max, get a ream of pastel paper and try to copy the same worksheet on maybe a peach or a light blue or a light green. Sometimes that actually helps children to focus better on what they're supposed to be doing. So try it out. It's a cheap way to make an accommodation, right? I like seated away from hallways and lockers at the end of rows for our students. Now, here's a biggie, fidget items. And thank you to Therapy Shop for letting us use this beautiful picture of fidget items. There is no such thing as sit still and pay attention. It is virtually impossible for all of our children to sit still and pay attention, isn't it? It kind of doesn't work. So fidget items are so beautiful because most of them now are quiet and we can do them under the desk. We can wear some of the items like this little band. We have tangles, very cool fidget items. If you Google fidget items, you will find a plethora of things that can help your child. So let's add those in and make sure the teacher understands that you definitely your child needs to move. Okay, let's talk a little bit about daily life skills. We love visual charts. Think about words then for your students as first, then next. Again, our small steps. Now, what about this budgeting, shopping, making lists? So many times our kids graduate high school and we don't realize that we haven't involved them in our daily life. It is never too early, guys, to start your children with budgeting, making the grocery list, talking about, how we go shopping, give them the small cart, which remember I said, anytime you use your big muscles, it's calming. Well, pushing a grocery cart for a little kid and loading it up would be a nice sensory activity. This is what I was talking about before. When we talk about daily life, we have to think about subjective ideas. Look at this bunny. He's saying, I saw a carrot. It was this big. That's tiny to us, right? So see how subjective things in life are. So when we talk about what we expect of a clean room or a clean body, how many of our teenagers don't clean their body appropriately, right? Sometimes calculus is easier for them than cleaning their body. Tell them what a clean body is by showing them a picture. Have you used your deodorant? Make a bin of deodorants for your student and cleansing items so that they know just what should be used for that task. Okay, almost there. We have a positive mindset. Goodness, guys, it is so important for us to think about positivity because our kids have maybe been through some struggles. Maybe they've been bullied. Maybe they don't feel confident in the skills that they've learned. Maybe they've had some failures that are weighing on their self-esteem. And I think also as we look at older kids and teenagers, they know they're struggling, right? They know they're having a little bit of a difficult time where maybe their peers aren't. So we need to really focus on looking at them and thinking, we don't want them to experience depression and anxiety and things that can really affect them as they get older. So how do we do that? We want to teach deep breathing to our students. I know they think, well, it's just breathing, but really our oxygen in our brains is so important. So how do we do that? We just practice, guys. It's very simple. Put your hand on your belly and breathe in nice and deep. And you want to do this and bring all that air in and then out and practice it with your students, especially when you're using, remember we talked about that 5-point scale with the colors and the visuals. When they're starting to get worked up, practice then, right then and there, stop and take those deep breaths. Do it before tests. You can write it in the IEP or accommodations that you can, have the student go out for a walk, a sip of water, that kind of thing. So the other thing that we talk about is building this confidence. All right, let's ask our student what makes them, right? So have them make a little map of themselves, maybe their name, Bob in the middle. And then out from that is things that Bob is good at, reading and caring and, things like that. How do you feel when you succeed? So just put those positive emotions in your child. It's one thing I did want to mention is grounding and reconnect. Have you ever driven to work and wondered how you got there? Whoa, I don't remember driving here, but I know I'm here because our body is so routined and programmed to do these routines, right? So when you add a sensory component, you're making it fresh and new. What does Thanksgiving dinner smell to you, right? What emotions come from that? Things come from that because your body, you've added a scent of turkey maybe, right? So if you're driving to work, I encourage you to stop at a stoplight, roll down your window, feel the air, add some other sense to it, and do the same thing with your students. Make it fun and add a sense. If they're feeling stressed and they're at their wits' end, have them relax and take deep breaths and look at one thing in the room. What do you see in the room that's blue? What do you see, Kim, that's blue? Okay, Kim sees a blue piece of paper. So she's then focused on something else other than her anxiety. So what is mindfulness? We, again, are taking a pause to feel, realize that we feel this at the same moment and not judging, right? Just accepting those feelings as they are and then thinking, okay, I feel this now. Here's what we can do. So lots of things, right? Whole body interventions from occupational therapy. The last slide that we have today is about home programs. Now, so many times people say, my goodness, we go to occupational therapy once a week, or you see my student once a week in school. And how is it supposed to be fixed, right? Well, first of all, we don't fix people. We empower them as occupational therapists. We want you to learn from what we tell you and then practice it. So each time that you practice this with your family, you're all going to be stronger for it. So it's very important as a caregiver to know the exact goals of any therapy and any IEP and be comfortable with them. Ask for copies, right? Do these activities with your child. It is really important to follow through at home to make everything click. Practice builds confidence. That's something I've said many times today. So then one of the other things is ask your child what his or her goals are. What are their goals for their treatment? It's important that we add those in because our children's opinion matters. All right, and a few final thoughts here before we take the questions. Please, anybody, if you're listening, I know punishment, it used to be removing recess, but it really, our kids need movement. When you're moving around, let's say you're focusing at your desk all day, one of the things you can do, right, is put some gum in to chew, add movement and senses to your mouth. You might stand up, take a drink of water, get some coffee. Getting up and moving around does boost that oxygen to the brain. So anytime we remove recess as a punishment would be a mistake because we maybe need to get that energy out, okay? Very important, because children that are behaving badly may actually be needing a release of their physical energy and may need some oxygen to their brain. So I hope you've liked this. There's some resources for you that you can download from the handouts. And I guess we'll take some questions right now.
Great. Cara, thanks so much. This has been fascinating.
You're welcome.
Some of the questions, Cara, relate to getting OT services. How does one go about it? Is it difficult to do as part of an IEP? And do there tend to be age limits? So some of our listeners have high school age children. Is it still appropriate to request OT in that context? So in general, how do parents or listeners go about getting OT services for their child?
Great questions. Well, first of all, let's talk about in the outpatient setting, and then we'll delve into school. Outpatient-wise, we need a prescription to treat children in most states. So ask your pediatrician if you're feeling like there's developmental concerns at any time. As a parent, of course, it's your right and privilege to say, hey, I want a script for OT, to evaluate. It does not hurt to evaluate a child, because we do want to look at all of this whole body and how this disability affects the body. In school, it is, again, you can ask for an evaluation for your district. Now, a lot of occupational therapists don't see children that are older because it's a really huge problem, because we've missed out on a lot of these kids, right? So we're learning now and working with older students. So it never, ever hurts to get an evaluation. You can open up your IEP at any time. And I would encourage you to then go to the team and mention your questions and concerns. And if your student's older, bring your student in to mention these questions and concerns too, because we want them to then build a great IEP to transition out. So,
Cara, are there specific problem areas that generally are accepted as being ones that can be addressed by OT?
Sure. Yes. Well, we can definitely work on the coordination piece. All of the things that I mentioned. Our big things are coordination, sensory, independent skills in daily life are the biggest. Buttoning, zipping, snapping, those motor skills for sure.
Okay. And how about OT for executive functioning? A number of people have mentioned having a question of whether OT works for executive functioning skills, and other school-related people who are on the webinar have said that they get requests for OT for executive functioning problems. Is that appropriate? Is that the right?
It is. That's a good question, because I think as I work around the United States, one of my courses I teach is on executive function, and I teach it to OTs specifically because I think a lot of OTs know how to work on it and some of them don't. So what happens is you want to make sure that when you get any occupational therapist, you ask them, are you familiar with executive function? Because absolutely it improves function. Speech language pathologists, a few of them also, tap into executive function. But when you look at it, how it I know it sounds executive function, sounds repetitive to say in a functional light, that's when occupational therapy can step in and say, let me teach you how to break this down, and work on it that way. But it is something that definitely bring it up with your occupational therapist. Call the clinic and ask them if they have someone that works with executive function.
So the main way then, just executive function is such a complicated topic. The main way that an OT would address that is helping to break things down, correct?
Well, it could be breaking things down. But, this is one of the things with executive function is we're talking about games that are when we're little kids, little children, if as parents right now, if you want to start working on executive function and think about it this way, we play games when we're children, imitating each other, making predictions about the environment. So charades, things like turn-taking games and imaginary pretend play. And a lot of our kids don't prefer that kind of play anyway. So executive function, I want to mention something else to you. It doesn't mature fully until age 25. So that's why the voting age in legal drinking age is older, because our children have time to mature. So I think a lot of people feel like, well, there's not much we can do. It's not mature yet. However, there is a lot that we can do to start building those skills earlier.
Right. Interesting. Just keeping on to this concept of age and OT, there are some adults listening in and they're asking whether OT is appropriate for adults.
There are some, yes, absolutely. You can check it with your therapist again, check locally. But we have a bunch of pediatric therapists, but OTs also work in other areas. So we work in mental health. And I think our roots as a profession began in mental health. And this is push now to have this trauma-informed care and to work with adults where they are and to not look at, a diagnosis and think, oh, there's no hope for them. There are adults going into this field right now, and it's growing as an occupational therapy profession as a whole, because we do want to, yes, it is very interesting. We have adults who work in skilled nursing, rehabilitation settings after head injuries and so forth. So there are many OTs, not just in the pediatric world, but in the adult world as well.
So to that point, there's a follow-up question here. Are there people who specialize in pediatric OT versus general OT? Yes. Okay. Yes. So you might be looking for a general OT if you're an adult. I wanted to come back to the large motor crossing the midline question. It's one that I'm interested in because my own daughter with sensory integration problems benefited tremendously from large motor activities. And which is, of course, not what you usually think of when you think of OT. You think OT, handwriting, So I wondered if you could sort of amplify how large motor and midline activities work and how they work on the body and why they're effective for kids.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked this because this is one of my other areas of passion. Can you tell I love my job? But what the cool thing is, though, about us. So think about this, kids, and I know many of us have those children. When you're sitting there at the desk, some of these kiddos are actually falling out of their chair. Why are they doing that? Because of sensory issues, posture issues, and gross motor issues. I think a lot of times with sensory processing disorder, we think texture, touch, taste, and all that. But we forget then as teachers and parents that there's this little prong of sensory processing disorder that works with postural disorders and what's called dyspraxia. So dyspraxia is this premise where we have a difficulty thinking about the plan, like our body's plan for movement. So sitting upright, and then how do we form the plan of I'm going to sit upright while I do my handwriting, and then I'm going to focus on shifting my weight so my bum doesn't get tired, get pins and needles on it. It's interesting because our body naturally does all these things to keep us comfortable in our chair and while we're using these motor skills. But with our kids with sensory processing, they may be lacking in those areas. So our kids then don't have as much coordination. Maybe with kids that have trouble knowing where their body is in space, they might have trouble with jumping jacks because they can't feel, are their feet on the ground? What is my arm doing? What's my right arm doing? They're actually decreased awareness of their body in space, which looks very clumsy and probably feels uncomfortable to them. So what we would do then is, scooter activities and gross motor, meaning we would have them maybe in the suspension equipment and have them lay on their bellies and, reach for different items to work on those motor skills. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, in her case, just sort of gymnastics and swimming were tremendously helpful with sensory integration and with focus. So I'm still intrigued by how that works.
A lot of times, you're right, swimming is one of those things, because if you think about the water provides nice input to the whole body, right?
Right.
And then a lot of times people do say that the martial arts are exceptionally beneficial for our kids.
Absolutely. Interestingly, there are a number of questions here about helping with homework. I'm not sure, I'll be curious to hear what you say about how OT can play in. And there are a number of parents who say having their child start and complete homework is like pulling teeth, having their child's resistant, putting schedules in place is difficult. I mean, these are typical, comments, but I'm wondering how OT might address these.
That's interesting. I think that's one of the most frustrating things that we get asked, the parents, not frustrating things we're asked, but frustrations of parents that we work with is this homework. And, it's hard because our kids have held it together all day in school, and even older kids, right? Again, if they're sitting there in school, and let's just look at the teenager, for instance, because I know probably a lot of these questions are about older kids. They're in school and they have to hold their body together, meaning they might be bothered by sights and sounds and feelings of puberty and all these other things. And they're trying to sit still in their desk all day long. When they come home, a lot of them fall apart. A lot of them just have tantrums and just want to be left alone because they're exhausted. So for those kind of situations, we always say build in activities immediately when the student comes home, healthy snack, stimulate the chewing, so maybe nice crunchy snacks are good for kids because when you use your chewing sense, it's calming. And then go outside and do some activities, something physical to get all that energy out, calm the body down, organize it for that homework. And again, small bursts of homework, I would say. A lot of times, look at the homework. It's hours and hours. It's a ton for our kids, and it's overwhelming. So breaking it down.
That makes a huge amount of sense to sort of regulate the system by doing activity. And that is addressing the homework concentration problem. Absolutely. That's really interesting. Yeah. Let me see some questions here about, here's one. How can an OT help doing tasks faster, staying on task?
I can answer that. Yeah, well, there's different things that we can do to quicken processing speed. So there are many cool things we can do, like clapping. We can use this interactive metronome technique where it's to a beat. So it's working on processing quicker. So if you look at that interactive metronome, there's a program called BAL, B-A-L, I think it's called Ball of Physics. But look it up. I don't know how to spell it. But that is something, again, where they're bouncing a ball, clapping, crossing midline, to a quick beat so that they're increasing this processing speed. There are definitely programs that an OT can implement in the clinic to improve that. That's true. It's not all OTs that are skilled in that, though, but you can look at them online for sure.
Okay.
It is something, yeah.
Here's a great question. She's asking for top suggestions for sensory diet components that can be implemented via an IEP in a classroom setting. Okay.
So anytime you have the sensory diet, it's got to be done often, right? So things that are nondescript that don't make a child stand out, obviously. That's when we love these whole brain classroom activities. If a teacher's willing to build something into the whole class, it could benefit everyone. But for specific people, if the teacher is not willing or able to do it, those things that are calming are the heavy work. So generally, I always say generally because there's that one or two kiddos that stands out. But let's think about those chair push-ups. So if you put your hands, behind on the bottom of your seat and try to push up, it's giving a lot of heavy work to the body. You can also do things to the hands, such as you can use a stress ball for the hands and work those muscles in the hands You can add to the desk just little exercises to the hands, such as, putting the hands together. We call it praying hands, but putting the hands together and bringing the elbows down, kind of pushing against the hands for resistance. Those kinds of things are important. A lot of teachers will wrap therapy band around the feet of the seat so the child can actually push and have resistance. One other thing that I wanted to mention was this alternative seating. There are cushions that our students can sit on that have air in them that replicate a big therapy ball but are in a much smaller proportion.
Interesting. Someone else has posted a tip that she wanted to relay that the best thing she did was buy a movable chair. That must not be in the classroom, but yeah, that I guess you could sit and then move around somewhat, right?
Absolutely. What a great idea for homework time. There's your answer for the homework.
Absolutely. So a number of questions here about how to find a good OT. I know that's hard, especially one who's used to dealing with focus and ADHD related issues. Do you have any suggestions? And what are the sort of national resources for OT?
That is a great question. Absolutely wonderful question there, because not all OTs are just like every profession, right? You guys, we've got new ones, we've got older ones, we've got veterans and different people. So there is, if you want to look specifically for a certified occupational therapist, we have the American Occupational Therapy Association, which is AOTA. The AOTA website is written for OTs and for the general public, to where it will give you information of how an occupational therapist would address X, Y, Z. So that's would help some of you with your questions. How would an OT look at that? So they have handouts.
What's the name of that website again, please?
American Occupational Therapy. So it's AOTA. And I want to say it's .org. But it's AOTA, the American Occupational Therapy Association. They have fact sheets, FACT, fact sheets that people can download of how OT can help. Also, if you're looking specifically at sensory processing, SPD STAR, so it's SPD STAR, I think it's .org also, is a really awesome, they have resources about sensory processing disorder, and really cool, again, fact sheets and downloads and things. And if you follow my blog, oftentimes I will give links to free worksheets and websites and helpful information that parents ask. So we all try, but that's how you would find an OT specifically trained in sensory.
Okay. And your blog again, Karen, I'll post that.
It's www.pocket.ot.com. So it's pocketot.com.
Got it. I'm posting that as a chat message, everyone. So, yes, I know, Janice, if you're listening, would you please post the resource sheet from Cara's deck, which everyone's interested in. It went by rather quickly, and I think there were some interesting posts there. All right, so we have very few minutes here. Let me just pick some questions out. There's lots of them here. Fidget toys, teachers who feel that they're a distraction. What's your feeling about using fidget toys in the classroom?
Well, again, I would definitely find some research that says, children cannot sit still and pay attention. There's really no such thing. I would then maybe discuss with the teacher personally what toys would be appropriate. So here's an example of something that's not as distracting that I've used. Get Velcro and tape it to the bottom of the desk. So sticky back Velcro, you can put one Velcro strip under the desk and use the fingers just to kind of scratch it. That is a very quiet, cheap and easy fidget toy. I would meet with the teacher and you don't want it, you're a team. Remember, for the child, you're a team. And say to the teacher, here's 15 options, pick 5, something to that effect.
Right.
And that way it's, giving some predetermined choices to the teacher that you think would be helpful for your child, but giving other choices as well, so that the teacher feels a little bit more in control of things and your child still gets the fidgets.
That makes a lot of sense.
One more thing, pockets. Yes. Build stuff into the pockets. Have your child wear like a hoodie, and in the pockets put just some rubber balls or something that no one even notices they're in the pocket.
Okay, that's a good idea. Oh, good. We got the resource page back on the screen. Maybe talk a little bit more about that amazing 5-point scale, Cara. That seemed at how parents can use that with their kids.
Absolutely. You can download it through that website. And, it's just 0 to 5. It's like the How Does Your Engine Run is another program. But, you're looking at a child feeling, engaging their own emotions. Our children are not well practiced in that skill. So number one, would be, I'm feeling wonderful today. And if your child is younger, you don't want to use 5 choices. Maybe you're going 1, 2, 3. So number 1 is wonderful. I feel wonderful, happy, joyful. Number 2 is I feel, if the child, you have to adapt it to your child's cognitive or thinking needs. So it's just a visual that your child can see, and they can learn to just know their feelings. That's the main point of any kind of visual for emotions, is that just to give your child a visual resource that you both can see and talk about. So you can be as creative as you want. Some people use thermometers to look at emotions. Hot would be boiling, angry, or very upset. Very common things are car engines on high gear for being upset. So, be creative. Minecraft, you can even use Minecraft. A zombie coming at you might be a 5, really super stressful. So get your child's interests involved in this, emotional awareness.
That's a great idea. I think that's something everyone can benefit from, right? Just focusing on naming the things that we're feeling. So this has been a wonderful webinar, Cara. I can't thank you enough. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. Please check attitudemag.com for past webinars and for lots of free downloads and resources. Cara, thank you again so much. Good luck with your amazing work. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.